Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Rants show. This is a very special episode, and I know I say that every single time, but this one is true because this is a very topical episode. Today I'm talking about iPad kids. Now, I don't just mean in general iPad kids, I'm talking about basically the iPad kid generation. That's what I mean. So I'm sure all of you have heard about iPad kids, and you know what? You might be an iPad kid yourself. You might have been raised in front of an iPad. Now, I was born too early for that kind of stuff. I did have iPads and stuff I never had an iPad when I was a kid, but I had like a smartphone when I was probably in middle school, I would say. But I was never like hooked on it. I was never hooked on it 24/7, which is unfortunately the case for kids these days and for the quote unquote iPad generation that this episode is about. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because we're living in the current day, we're living where iPad kids have been around long enough for there to be scientific data behind, like, the difference between an iPad kid and a regular kid. Surprise, surprise. It's not very good, ladies and gentlemen. It's not very good. iPad kids typically have very, very short attention spans. Who would have thought that being force-fed constant stimuli from the moment you were born to current day is a bad thing? Who would have thought that 16 hours of screen time a day, every day, was a bad thing? Who thought that rather than eating dinner with your parents, you were glued to a screen watching Cocomelon or whatever the hell you were watching? Who could have seen that coming? But it's here. And you have this generation of iPad kids that are now in school, going to school, and they're not doing too well. You can't have your iPad in school. You can't be watching constant YouTube. TikTok, I guess, would be included in this. YouTube, TikTok, everything. These iPad kids are really struggling. And my heart goes out to them because they never had a chance. Like, let's be honest, they never had a chance. When you're 3 years old and your parents give you an iPad, you don't understand, hey, this is the worst possible thing I could be given. You don't get that. And by the time you realize that, it's already too late. It's like if you were hooked on opioids as a child, when you were a teenager, no one can blame you for that because it happened way before you were even sentient enough to say no. And that's what's really unfortunate about this whole thing. So that's what I'm talking about today. My heart goes out to all the little iPad kids out there. There would be times where I would be sitting in a restaurant, not when I was a kid, but when I was a little bit older, maybe middle school, high school age, and I would be out at dinner with like friends or with, whoever, and you would always see the young couple, the really young couple, like in their 20s, early 30s, and I never saw one of their kids without a screen in their face. The oldest would have an iPad, the youngest would have a tablet, one kid would have mom or dad's cell phone. They wouldn't engage with their parents at all. It's like, why even take them to dinner? Why even take them to dinner? What's the point? I mean, at this point, you might as well just go out to dinner and just Zoom with your kids. Just have an iPad set up at the table and just have a Zoom call with your kids. That way you don't have to pay for a meal for them. You just leave them at home. I mean, what's the difference? You don't talk to them. You don't engage with them. They're just husks. They're just husks. And that's what's really sad. Very, very sad. Now, I will give iPad kids some slack. There are times where I've been on a plane and there's a little kid with an iPad. Fine. whatever. If it keeps them from screaming the entire time, fine, let them have the iPad. But for most things in life, car rides to the grocery store, being at the grocery store, sitting in the shopping cart on an iPad, like, come on, guys. Come on. How as parents can you allow this? You just think that having your child glued to a screen their entire life, their early development years, is a good thing? Did we really need to wait for all these studies to come out before we realized how bad this was for kids? I mean, really? We couldn't put two and two together? It's obvious. Like I said, iPad kids are now in school. Now, if you encounter an iPad kid and you talk to them, it is very clear that they're an iPad kid. They just don't have the same social skills that you get when you're really, really young. 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. They don't have those. I'm not saying all, but most. I'm talking about like the diehard iPad kids. The ones that were hooked on that shit. The ones that were like ingrained in the pixels. So it's very unfortunate. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Like every video, I always appreciate your thoughts and what you think. First of all, are you an iPad kid? This is a safe space, so feel free to let us know down in the comments if you are in fact an iPad kid. There's nothing to be ashamed of, so let me know. Also, I want to know if you know like iPad kids, like if your siblings are iPad kids or you have friends with siblings who are iPad kids, are they a little different? Are they a little off? It's like kids who are homeschooled. They're just like not bad, but just like slightly off. There's something off. And most importantly, I want to know what your thoughts are on this. If you were a parent, would you allow your child to become an iPad kid? It is the path of least resistance, which I guess is, something that some parents do enjoy, but it's not for me. I wouldn't let my kid do that. So let me know your thoughts down below. I appreciate you listening to this, and I will see you tomorrow.